Welcome back to My Trauma's Chronic, but I'm Iconic, where we embark on a journey to explore the transformative world of educational leadership. I'm thrilled to be your guide on this captivating voyage as we delve into the minds and experiences of visionary leaders who are shaping the future of education. In this episode, we'll unravel the stories, strategies, and insights of those at the forefront of educational innovation and change. From inspiring educators to pioneering administrators, we'll uncover the key to effective leadership, the challenges they face, and the triumphs they have propelled them forward. This podcast is more than just a platform for a discussion. It's a beacon of inspiration and empowerment for all those who are passionate about education. Whether you're a seasoned educator seeking fresh perspectives or a buzzing leader eager to make your mark, you'll find something here to ignite your passion and fuel your journey. So, grab yourself a cup of tea, get cozy, and let's get started. Can you tell us a bit about your background and what you do?
Okay, my background, where do I begin? So I think in terms of my background, probably the best place to begin is to say I am a daughter of the Windrush generation and that my mother was part of the Windrush generation, came over here in the mid 1950s. Um, and I never imagined, because of my experiences of school, that one day I'd be a head teacher, but I did become a head teacher. I was one of the youngest heads back in the, gosh, now I feel really old, back in the 1990s to turn around a failing primary school. And it's my whole experience of being young, black, female, and a new mum, and being a head teacher that led me to the path that I'm on now. And that path is heading up a company called Integrity Coaching, which is London's leading coaching company for senior school leaders, and really about enabling school leaders to engage with the emotional aspects of what it means to lead, but also leading from a place of integrity and purpose and vocation. So that's who I am, and that's what I'm up to in the world.
Wow, that's that's like being a young mother, a young head teacher, failing primary school, trying to turn that around.
Yeah.
That's a lot of responsibilities and a lot to juggle. Like,
It was a lot, and I don't think you realize, well, I certainly didn't realize at the time, but then, I was young, and when you're young, you don't have the wisdom of the years that are yet to come. And, I loved that school. It really was I suppose in many respects, a passion project. And yeah, and you do it. You do your best. You do your best.
um, you said, something. If you don't want to go into it, do let me know. Don't feel obliged. You said that you have had like difficult experiences, which makes you now surprised that or were surprised that you became a head teacher.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or were your youngest, what, if you don't mind not sharing, why would your younger self be surprised?
My younger self would be surprised because at school, the messages were that I was never going to amount to anything. My secondary school made it really, really clear that young girls like me who came from Black working class families, their expectations of us were particularly low. So there are three memories that stick out in my mind. There were more, but the three that stick out in my mind were my art teacher. When I was talking, he told me to go outside and swing on the trees and eat bananas like my friends and relatives, the monkeys do. Yeah. I had my careers teacher when he asked all of us what we wanted to be when we left school. And at that time, my self-esteem was pretty low, but I thought, oh, I love working with children. I want to be a nursery nurse. I was told that was too high an aspiration and I should consider being a cashier in the local supermarket. And I studied A-level English. And I remember my A-level English teacher in the middle of us all reading a round of Shakespeare, and it was my turn to read out loud. She told me to stop speaking and to never speak in her class again because I didn't know how to read standard English properly. So that's why my younger self surprised that I ever became a head teacher because, yeah, the majority of my teachers didn't believe in me, didn't believe that I could achieve something, anything in life. Yeah. So I had for a long, long time, I had a very, very low, I hid it, but I had very
Mm,
low self-esteem, very low self-esteem.
definitely. I feel like in my head, I feel like I'll be so confrontational, but knowing me and that like I'd probably be like so like withdrawn and unable to confront it. Like, how did you deal with that? Because, it's like you were a minority, in a classroom, I'm assuming with full of white children.
No, no, I went to school in South London. My school was
Oh,
mixed. But the
and
majority of our teachers were white, and my school, it was two grammar schools that had amalgamated to become one of the first comprehensive schools. So there was a lot of snobbery amongst the teachers. They did not want to teach in a comprehensive school system. They believed that they were elite, and as far as they were concerned, that the attention that they would give would be to the white middle class children. So
that's
it wasn't,
something.
yeah. So my experience wasn't just me. Other friends, people that I grew up with had similar experiences. And one or two that I'm still in contact with now, we talk about, particular teachers and the impact they had upon us. Yeah.
It must have been traumatic in a sense. As a
Oh,
young
what?
child, you're impressionable, you might believe everything you hear from, an adult. Did you feel that way? How did you feel?
Well, how did I feel? Well, as I said, I carried around a lot of had very low self-esteem for a very long time, but you normalize that. I didn't even realize that what I was carrying around inside of me was not a reflection of who I was, that I was absorbing society's reflections as my own, as a sense of who I didn't realize, but that sense of low self-worth, not feeling any, feeling that I was good at anything. I carried it around with me for a long, long, long time. And I suppose I'll share it with you now, and something that I'm having to contend with. You said that it must have been traumatic. Last year, I had a cancer diagnosis, and that cancer diagnosis revealed that the cancer that I had was one that is prevalent in women of colour. And so now what I'm having to do is to look at how and why racial trauma is carried in our bodies. So I'm not saying that, the racism that I faced when I was a young girl was why the cancer manifested in my body, but I'm pretty certain in terms of many of the books that I've been reading now since that diagnosis that, trauma travels along ancestral lines. We carry it in our genes, in our DNA. And, my surname is Grant. That's not my original African surname. That's the Scottish slave owners who decided that my ancestors would have to take on their name. So there's a lot there in terms of the younger Viv and the Viv Grant that you see today.
Wow, that must be a journey to say the least.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's an ongoing journey, I would say, an ongoing journey.
and it's never. It feels like it never ends. When there's a journey, it's a continuous work. It's like constantly having to address it in many different aspects of your life.
Yeah.
What pivotal moment or experience led you to pursue a career in
Wow.
educational leadership?
That's a really interesting question. So, as I said, I never imagined that one day I would be a head teacher. And the school where I ended up being head teacher, again, even when I think about it, it feels really kind of bonkers because the school was really racist. I was going to say it was openly racist. And when I first got to the school, and it was a school in Stockwell, Brixton, majority Black community, but because of the way in which the majority white staff spoke to their parents, the kids thought I had to be a cleaner. I couldn't be a member of staff. There are members of staff who spoke about the children in the, I mean, even now when I think about it, who would refer to the boys as gorillas, and that would go uncontested. It was all, I mean, I look back now and it's a miracle. It's a miracle I ever became head of that school because I hated it. The first year was incredibly lonely. I wasn't head at the time. I was just an ordinary teacher at the school. But then gradually things moved, things changed, staff changes. And the woman who became the head teacher, I really respected. and I was on board with her vision. And by that time, I'd moved into become deputy head teacher. But then what happened was, when I became deputy, 6 months later, Ofsted were introduced, and no one knew. The education system didn't know what Ofsted was about. We didn't have a clue.
Mm.
And so we were one of the first schools to be inspected, and we failed. We went into special measures. And the head teacher said she wasn't going to stay. And I was devastated. I was like, you can't. We have this dream. We were going to change the school together. But she did. She moved on. We then had a series of acting heads who just did not care about the school. The tales that I could tell, but I'm not going to on this podcast. But they didn't care about the children, and I did. And I didn't realize I was leading at the time. So what would happen when you go into special measures? You then have a series of monitoring visits by Her Majesty's inspectorates. There are clear targets that a school has to meet to show that it understands the actions or the targets and the actions it needs to take to move itself out of special measures. So the acting heads, they didn't have a clue. So I had my own class at the time, and I'd be like, okay, this is what HMI, Her Majesty's Inspectorate, telling us to do. I get in really early. I say, this is what they're telling us to do. This is what you need to do. So I'm telling the head teachers who are being paid far more than me, this is what you need to do. I will go and teach a full day. Then I will come back. I will check on you. I will tell you what you need to do for the next day or the rest of the week. And so that's what was happening. But I didn't realize I was leading. For me, it's just like, I love this school. There's no way we should be in special measures. I'm going to do something. And then after a year, the governors came to me and they said, Viv, we're going to advertise again for the substantive head teacher post. We'd like you to apply. But by this time now, I'm 6 months pregnant with my first child. So in my head, I'm like, no, I'm not applying. But you asked me what made me and what was the pivotal moment. There was a child in the school who came to me. His name I still remember, David Masisi. If by any chance in the world you listen to this podcast, know that you were pivotal in my decision to become head teacher. Because David came to me and he said to me, Miss Grant, are we failures? And I always say to schools when I speak at conferences that they will know if they've ever had that category or that label hung over them as not good enough or special measures. It's not just a label. It is something that that's the community, individuals take on for themselves. They personalize it. So when David said to me, Miss Grant, are we failures? Of course, my response to him, David, no, you're not. But also, it's triggering me from when I was at school, when I was told I was a failure. And then David is then asking me, Miss Grant, are you going to be head teacher, our head teacher? We want you to be our head teacher. So now I have David saying this to me. I have my little old frightened self inside saying, no, I can't ever possibly be. But then it dawns on me, perhaps, Viv, you can. Perhaps, Viv, you can make a difference. And so, it was David. He was the trigger point. And then I spoke to friends and family. And they're all like, yeah, Viv, you should go for it. And so literally when I was 8.5 months pregnant, I went for the substantive interview and I got it. And when my son, Isaac, he's now a big man, but when he was 5 months old, I went back to work and I took up the role as substantive head teacher. So that was the trigger.
Wow. You know what? This is a little bit of I don't know. I think the term is a side road. But do you think, um, Ofsted has recently come and said they're taking away that one word
Yeah.
rating system?
Yeah,
How do you feel about that?
I think it's good. I think
Sorry.
it's what the profession has been campaigning for a very long time. What it brought it down to was that, the government before was saying just by one single word judgment, a parent could decide whether that school was appropriate for their child. That's just all of us in the profession knew that wasn't true. There are so many nuances to what makes a school right for a child. And you need as a parent, to me, I just think it's quite insulting, really, to think that parents are simple. They just need a simple one word and they'll know. No. You need to walk around the school. You need to pick up the vibe. You need to be asking questions that are really pertinent to you as a parent as to how your child will be nurtured, how your child will grow, come into the fullness of themselves as a young person. So I'm in 100% agreement with it. I think it's a really good thing. It signals change. And it signals that us in the profession, particularly school leaders who've been campaigning for this, thank God, at last they've been listened to.
And it's very tragic that, this all, like, I guess, in a way ties into the work that you're doing with, like, head teachers. But, like, it's sad that it had to go to a point where somebody had to go, take their own life for them to be like, and for it to, it's not, I don't think, the head teacher taking their life was enough. I think it was the media attention and backlash that they were more concerned about. But it was like, I feel like it always has to go to an extreme for people to listen and do something about it.
Mm. But that's the
And,
sad thing, Rosmi, because, I said, one of the reasons why I set up this company, actually, I have it here. About 10 years ago, I wrote this book, Staying Ahead, The Stress Management Secrets of Successful School Leaders. Actually, I have a look here. I think even at the front, I quote, okay, so this is 10 years ago. This
mm,
is what I have here at the front. Head teacher found dead in burnt out car after suicide. Mail Online 2014. Head teacher killed herself after 6 months in job. Coroner rules. The Guardian 2013. So what I'm saying is, it is tragic that Ruth Perry took her own life, but it's been going on.
mm,
It's been going on for years and for decades. And what it tells you is really, and we still support head teachers who feel like that. That's why I'm so passionate about this work, that people don't recognize. I say it's an inner work, and all the externals that people see in terms of heads, leading well, leading with confidence. Yes, that is part of the role, but there's a deeper inner work, and no one really understands what that is for head teachers in terms of the emotional toll of the role. And I think, going back to your point, the tragedy that it took for Ofsted to change, let's remember they weren't going to. It's only because we had a change of government. So again, it gives you an indication of the climate around which school leaders were expected to achieve and to do well. It was that was not a climate in which there was an ounce of compassion or understanding. And it's about really recognizing there's a bigger frame here within which all of this needs to be seen and viewed. But I can feel myself starting to get a bit so I'm going to calm down a bit because I feel really strongly about this. There's still more work that needs to be done. Yes, changing the way in which schools are reported on in terms of levels of outcome and so forth. That's a start, but there's still so much more.
definitely. I feel, and again, it shows, I don't know why I said again, but it shows the power of what a vote can do.
Yeah.
Can you share some like highlights from your early career in education that influence your approach to leadership?
Wow, highlights in my early career that influenced my approach in leadership. That's really interesting. And it's interesting because it's often a question actually that I ask aspiring leaders when they're growing into leadership. Who are the people that they've come across and who have shaped the way in which they hold leadership? And to be honest, I have to say it's been the people who've led me really badly that have made me realize that's not how I want to lead. So in one of my very first schools, I had a head teacher who will remain nameless. And he gave the impression that we had a voice, and that when we had staff meetings, that it was a discussion, and that actually based upon people's views and perspectives, they'd be listened to, they'd be respected, and they would influence any decision that was going to be made, or the matter that we were discussing. But it soon became apparent when I disagreed with him. I'll say what it was that I disagreed with him over. He wanted to cut afternoon play, and I had reception at that time, which were the youngest children in the school, apart from nursery, obviously, when they start. And so I went to him the next day and I said to him, I didn't think it was appropriate. Look how tiny they are. They need to have afternoon play. And he told me that people like me had a chip on my shoulder and I should learn to be quiet. Yeah, exactly, Rosmi, exactly.
Sorry,
And then
one moment. Sorry to interrupt. I understood the emotion behind it, but I don't think my autism understands. What does a chip on a shoulder mean?
very often what is said to people of color, if we have
Oh,
a voice, not if we have a voice, when we try to express a difference of opinion, what we're saying is not heard in relation to the matter at hand. What it can be is that other people will just see that we're making a fuss over nothing, and it's to do with the color of our skin. I went to him as a professional, someone who was skilled in teaching reception at the time, who understood about child development. And so you're asking me, pivotal moments in terms of what has shaped my leadership. That was an example of bad leadership. I never wanted to be a leader like that. You don't pretend that you're leading a school where people are allowed to have a voice and can contribute to decisions. And when individuals have a contrary or different perspective, speak to them in such a way that they feel that they are not of value. So it does, yeah. So after that, I left very quickly. It's like, that's not the school I'm staying at. I'm not staying at that school. So that's a
definitely.
bad example. That shaped me. But then there were good examples. So the woman who I was her deputy and then left when then she left after Ofsted. I loved her. I loved her. She was an inspiration for me. The way in which she really, and again, that culture was very hard to change, because again, she was taking over a school that was really steeped in very old-fashioned ways of teaching and learning. But the way I saw her in terms of making the school more welcoming for our parents, ensuring that we were a school that really, I don't want to say in a sort of superficial way, but diversity was respected and acknowledged. There wasn't a superficial stance to that. Whereas before she came, there really, really was. The school was racist without a doubt. But her, as a white woman, she was really clear in terms of supporting Black teachers in the school, but ensuring that we didn't have a deficit model approach to how we were addressing issues of inequality, and really having high expectations she had high expectations of me, and I'll always be grateful to her for that, but high expectations of every single child in that school. So she was a very good role model.
You know, like, I feel it's it it brings me so much anger to hear these experiences. Like the fact that you still have your DBS for me is a shock. The way I would have reacted if it kept happening in that build up, I would have probably, I'm gonna swear, but I would have probably lost my shit. Because there's like, and I probably would have had a DBS at the end of the day. Like, how was your mental health at that time?
Well, you have again, I think, I look back, Rosmi, and for me, it's, you ask how was my mental health at the time. Probably actually not very good, actually. When I think about it now, probably would have said I was okay. But one thing I know about Viv Grant is that a particular driver of mine is what's called the be strong. So if you have be strong as a trait, you can present it as being very confident. You can, you take things in your stride, you're good in a crisis, but be strongs also hide their emotions, and they're not really very good at showing vulnerability. I would hope I'm better now, but I think in my younger days, I don't think I was. I don't think I was really in tune with how I was feeling. I think I bottled a lot up. Yeah, yeah, I really do. And I think those who were closest to me, by that I mean my husband, probably got the short stick. They probably got the worst of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They say often, like, one example they use often is like nurses. They're like, most of them anyway, are really, really nice to their like patients. And
Yeah.
when they go home, they like unleash
Mm. Mm.
everything. It's hard, like, especially I got to imagine like if there's so much racial prejudice, so much people that, if I was employed by somebody, I would hope somebody would believe in my abilities. Um, and not to have that, having to go through like prejudice and discrimination all the time, that you can't, and you have to keep a face of the work because you can't prove these people right that you're, this black woman that's aggressive or,
Mm.
and
Mm.
then when you're at home, you were able to just
Mm.
release.
Mm. Yeah. Mm.
It must have felt really heavy to just keep it in and like,
Yeah, I agree. It felt heavy, but I normalized it. I mean, again, that's why I do this work with school leaders because I've been there and we
mm,
get used to normalizing the abnormal, and we can't have that. If we're going to have healthy school leaders leading healthy schools and our children also knowing what it means to be able to speak, be emotionally literate, then actually we need to actually acknowledge that normalizing the abnormal is not normal.
mm.
Yeah.
Because you could like for me like in things that go in my life it it's like you don't know any better and when people ask you oh what's going like what's not working you're like you can't name it because it's just
Yeah.
a constant in your life.
Yeah.
um what made you decide okay I'm going to go from an educator to focusing specifically on supporting head teachers and senior school leaders in you know, your coaching and your consultancy work.
Again, it was a journey. So a point came in my headship where I realized that the people around me who they said were support, they weren't really support. They were making judgments about me. They were holding me to account. They weren't individuals that I could really speak openly and honestly about the stresses of the role. It felt as though if I did, they would hear it as, oh, Viv Grant can't or she's not able, which wasn't what I was yearning for or saying. It was about just actually I'm human. And I just need to speak to someone who understands that I'm a human being in terms of this role. So there's a
Mm,
phrase, it's not my phrase, it's an American author, Parker Palmer. He talks about taking care of the soul in the role. And that's what I needed. And that's what Integrity, my company, does now. So what happened was in my headship, we had a counsellor who worked with the most vulnerable children in our school. And there were times when I found myself having to talk to her. And it was through talking to her that I began to recognize that actually, if you have a professional who can just listen to you, not necessarily give you advice, but really listen to you and create a space that's safe, there's something very powerful within that. And so when I left headship, I went to work at the Institute of Education and I was a tutor on their mentoring and coaching program for school leaders. And it was through that whole experience of seeing the power of coaching that I eventually then made the decision to train as a coach. And then after a couple of years, set up my own company providing coaching services for senior school leaders. So that's kind of, yeah, the journey and as to why a recognition that if we say we're going to be offering support for school leaders, we need to recognize that there needs to be different types of support. And very often, what school leaders get is the support that could be termed as low trust, where there's low trusting them and high accountability. And what I believe is that we need a system where there's high trust and high accountability, but the accountability is self accountability, not necessarily accountability to others who are always, whether there's like a carrot or a stick approach. If we have that accountability that's anchored in the term I use is the truth of who we really are, then we're far more likely to succeed because it's an internal locus of motivation as opposed to being external.
What role do you think mentorship or guidance played in your journey to leadership,
Yeah.
being a leadership coach and consultant?
Mm.
Or was there any?
There are probably a few along the way, but the one who I remember most fondly and and with great affection, she's dead now, but her name was Margaret Denning. And she was one of the first Black heads, I think, of higher education or further education colleges. I can't remember how I found Margaret, but when I first applied to be a deputy head, I went to her for interview practice. And yeah, she became my mentor. She saw things in me that I didn't see. And she really just helped me to ground myself and to own the qualities that she saw in me and enabled me to speak to them. And yeah, so I remember her fondly, actually. She hasn't crossed my mind for a long time. As I said, she's dead now, but she really was very instrumental in terms of me sort of stepping onto that path to leadership.
How do the responsibilities of head teachers and senior school leaders differ from those of other educational roles? And what unique challenges do they face as a result?
I think with leadership in general, there is the weight of responsibility without a shadow of a doubt. I think the best way I can answer that is with a bit of an anecdote, really. I was speaking at a head teachers conference, and I was speaking with the heads about the challenges of their role and that how no one really, really understands headship unless they've stepped into their shoes. And the head teacher came up to me afterwards and said to me, Viv, you're so right. My governors, they thought it would be really worthwhile as a part of CPD if they got a top executive from one of the FTSE 100 companies to come in and shadow me for the day. He could then look at how I approached my work, how I approached my tasks, how I approached the demands on my role, and then he could give me advice and feedback on how to improve. And at the end of the day, he came back to her and he said to her, I can't give you advice. He said, in my role, being paid probably 10 times more than you, I am paid to develop expertise in one particular area. I don't have 101 disturbances throughout the day. I don't have to switch from one audience or from one mode to the next. I am allowed to focus. However, I've shadowed you for the day. I've seen you have to deal with an irate parent. I've seen you have to, we always laugh at this one, but it's true, with blocked toilets. I've seen you had to deal with a serious safeguarding incident. I've seen you had to deal with, and prepare a report for a governor's meeting. I've seen you had to prepare or deal with a plethora of all high level demands, and not just one of them at a time, multiples of them coming in for you to be expected to respond to with a high level of expertise. He said, I don't know how you do that because I would never be able to do that. So when you say about the differences, I think that little anecdote explains the differences in terms of being a head teacher. And not many people see that. I think one of the things that frustrates me the most, and I know does frustrate a lot of head teachers, is that individuals tend to think that one, oh, but it's a school, they're children, surely, there are no pressures. And two, all you do is sit in your office all day and ping up on the keyboard. Nothing is further from the truth. If people truly understood the demands and the role of the head teacher, there'd be far more compassion, far more understanding.
And you know what's really funny? If there was a takeover day, they wouldn't even last an hour.
It's exactly, you're so right. You're so, so right there. They wouldn't. They
And I
really,
was being generous as well. Like,
yeah, you're so right there.
you know, like for us to like gain a bit of insight, I know it differs day to day depending on what type
Mm.
of school it is. not even that, just school to school.
Mhm.
Can you provide an insight into the day-to-day responsibilities that head teachers and senior leaders typically manage and how these tasks contribute to the overall functioning of the school? I feel like that's a really key aspect of the question because I
Say that
keep
last bit
running.
again for me again. What's the key aspect of that question? Say it again to me, please.
How these tasks contribute to the overall functioning of a school.
You know, Rosmi, there's just so much in there because what you have is for a head teacher, they will have their vision, they will have their school development plan, which are all the ways in which they want to move their school forward. There is no ordinary day for a head teacher. Head teacher will tell you that no 2 days are the same. So, of course, they're going to be having meetings with their team. They'll be having meetings with their senior leadership team, their office team, the staff team, the site team. I mean, there are a range of meetings throughout the whole school day. There are other things that they'll be having to do in terms of maybe budget, other things in terms of maybe governors, other things in terms of engaging with the pupils. There is just so much. As I always say to head teachers, your job description is one thing, the reality is often completely different.
Hmm. It's even just thinking about it is overwhelming.
Mhm.
And then the job must become much more challenging when there's people with, a variety of, all children have, needs, but more complex needs. Um, it comes with even if they don't have complex needs, like for example, them being in care, there's several meetings that you have to go to for one child.
But I think most heads or the ones that I speak with would tell you they do love the job as much as we're talking about the challenges here. Many heads step into it because it's a vocation, it's a
Mm,
calling. They know that they have something where they can make a difference. Sometimes the challenges are more sort of magnified because one, they're being asked to do more with less, and that's almost impossible. And two, for at least the last 14 years, they've been working in a climate that has very much almost been against what they're seeking to do as educators, where they have been questioned, where they have been doubted about their own professionalism, and that's hard. So, I don't want to paint this awful picture that,
yeah,
heads are sinking.
yeah,
Yes, the challenges are there, but let's also remember there are very, very, very good people in this profession
there
who
are.
are there for the right reasons. And let's hope that with the change, with the changes that we've witnessed recently in terms of our government, if they are allowed to lead in the way in which many know they are able to and can, hopefully we'll see less of those awful stories in the newspapers and more, but then it doesn't sell, does it? The joy of headship doesn't necessarily sell as much,
Yeah,
in terms of like, oh, the tragedies of it. But that's what I would hope. It's a vocation, it's a calling, and
certainly
teaching and
is.
leading should be a joy.
You know what? One of my best experiences of this head teacher, she was very, very strict, but I think she was reasonably strict. You know, she wouldn't demand something. Most of the time she was reasonably strict anyway.
Mm.
It was, and I remember I came into care, it was COVID and we all was getting back into lessons.
Yeah.
Anyway, before let me tell you the first part. I received this package into my foster carer's house. I was so scared because I was like, oh my God, my parents found out where I lived. I don't know what's going on. I was so scared. I was skeptical. I'm hyperventilating. I'm going into crisis. Anyway, I was like, okay, let me open it. Let me open it. Let me open it. I see this pink tissue paper, and then I look in, and then I pull the stuff out because I'm like, it's going to be the worst of the worst. It's going to be some sort of. It was full of sweets and a message, being like, we're by your side through this difficult journey. And remember, if you need anything, we're here. I'd imagine receiving that. I don't know why the post was that late, but it was 11 p.m. at night.
Right,
So it
okay.
wasn't really the best. It was more frightening, but it was that. And I remember when I got distressed one time. anxiety. I was really distressed. I was having a flashback. I'm banging, and all of senior leadership were there, and the head of because they didn't know my struggles. They always, you know, I was always got my homework in on time. I always, I was a perfect student in the aspect that I got things done. Was never late, never like that. And when they saw, they all got so concerned of me that they all stopped what they were doing to just be there. They didn't intervene like they would intervene if, if
Yeah.
the risk was escalating, but they just let me get
Mm.
distressed and actually feel what I was going through. Because sometimes I feel like people just try to like contain, but that
Mm.
just causes a bigger reaction.
Yeah.
And I'm calming down, and my head teacher is offering. This woman is busy. Like she has over what was it? Over like 2,000 students to look
Mm.
after. And she was like, "Do you want me to give you a hand massage?" And then
Oh.
she got her like own hand cream out, and it was really expensive as well. And she was generous. She was like giving me a hand massage, and then she was like, the head teacher's office was big, at the school that I was, secondary
Yeah.
school I was. She was like, "Oh, here's my cat, like settee." She called it a couch. I don't know why she did that, but she called it a couch. She was like, "This is like you can sleep here. Just lie down,
Oh.
sleep here." And usually she could have sent me to like the first aid room because
Yeah.
there's like a gurney sort of thing there so you can sleep.
Yeah.
But she was there, and I can hear in the next door. She
Mm.
called my social worker and said, like, "I'm not letting Royce and me go out to school. You are coming to pick her up, not a foster carer.
Yeah.
You are coming to pick her up." And anyway, she wanted to get her phone,
Mm.
but it vibrated. And the way that I got up,
Mm.
so scared and alarmed, and
Mm.
she raised it up, and that was the first time somebody's raised something about my autism. She
Right.
didn't say it was autism. She was like, "That's something you need to get checked out."
Right. Okay.
And she like signaled, and she didn't care where my social worker was. She was like, "You're coming. I'm not dismissing her until you come here."
Yeah.
And I was like, they were like, "Oh, I can't. My social worker is good, but she has something really important that was going on." And she was like, "I can't come." So what she did was she called the service manager. They were like, "Your social worker is coming to pick this child up,
Mm.
and I'm not letting her out. And I don't care how long it's going to take." And at this point, it's past. The crisis happened at like 12.
Wow.
This is 4 o'clock.
Gosh.
She's like, "Yeah, she's not going out. School finishes at like they finished earlier, but it was like 10 past 3. That's what we usually finish, but
Mm.
finish at 3 o'clock because they let like year groups go out of time to
Right.
help with COVID." She was like, "I'm not letting her go." And she made my social worker come, and it was 4:30, and she really advocated for me. And I found out later, when they have like, oh, what's it called? Those child in need meetings every week,
Yeah. Yeah.
my
Yeah.
parents, and they were questioning about how did you not know your child was getting sexually abused? They were questioning, they were really going for it. And I didn't know until I came into care. They will be like, keep on going and like pressing my parents, be like, can't just not know. You can't not, what are you doing? And they always advocated for me. And it's a massive school and it's a mainstream school. So that level of care, like you wouldn't expect, you were like, oh, ex teacher would deal with it,
Mm.
not the whole of SLT and my head of form and the head of the year group as well as the head teacher. And it just shows, there are really good people out there.
Exactly, exactly. And they're the people we want to keep because look how you're telling me that story. And it's those individuals who saw you. You weren't a statistic, you weren't a number, you were you, a child going through so much trauma, and they were going to be there for you no matter what. They're the kind of things I think parents want to know.
Mm,
Who are the people? Sometimes when we do work with teachers and school leaders, we say we teach and you lead out of who you are. It's not
yeah.
enough to have technical expertise. the children, just like you described, they connect with the teachers, who they are, not what they teach. And if they teach it really, really well, but again, it's out of who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, the teacher can change so much of their life. Like I've had negative, like when I was in a special school, I had a very negative head teacher,
Mm.
but like who was the complete opposite of what this head teacher was like. But that memory will always stay in my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it was, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a like, little changes. Um, you know, one thing I wanted to how do head teachers and senior leaders how navigate the balance between fostering a positive school culture and addressing, you know, disciplinary issues or conflicts within the school community?
Mm. Really good question. I think some schools do it really well, and I've seen some schools do it not so well. And I've seen, yeah. And I think the way schools, I've seen some schools where they do it not so well. At the moment, we've had a really big thing in education around teacher well-being. But in some schools, it's gone to such an extreme where actually you have teachers who will say that they won't do things because doesn't support their well-being. And I actually think we need to reframe well-being. For me, it's around vocational purpose. It's a bigger, broader conversation. And if we can understand what we're talking about when we talk about vocational purpose, being in right relationship with self, others, and society, it makes well-being less individualistic and more to do with about what it means to be well in the world. I don't think schools are having those conversations enough. But I think and so sometimes what we see then is where schools are trying to get the balance right between having a positive culture and holding individuals to account, the waters get muddied because what happens is, again, the way I would almost phrase it is, you not children, the teachers become a bit childlike and dependent upon the leaders to meet their needs, or for them to stamp their feet and say, I'm not going to do X, Y, and Z. And then leaders give in because the teachers are saying it's not meeting my well-being needs. Whereas if you have a different culture, which is about why are we here? What's our vocational purpose? What does that look like in terms of how we show up as teachers and leaders? What does it mean when challenges come? And it's a constant conversation. Then I think it is easier to maintain a positive culture and accountability because you're coming from a different perspective. You're coming from what I would say as adult to adult. You're fostering adult to adult communication. Whereas in the other sort of scenarios where it doesn't work so well is maybe you have staff who unintentionally have been infantilized and therefore they get trapped in a child ego state, and the leaders don't realize that actually they're becoming almost like over adaptive parents in terms of how they are responding to the demands of their teachers. So really what we want are schools where it's adult to adult, people are present, they are aware, and they're having those conversations which are more to do with who are we, how do we connect what it means to be leaders who are led by a sense of vocation, purpose, and passion. Then I think it's different.
I feel like I know quite a few people. Um, it's a very well known. I'm going to be very brief. I have mentioned them previously in podcasts, but there was a very specialist educational provision in Croydon. It's mainly around Croydon. I feel like you know who I'm talking about.
Maybe, maybe not, but just carry on.
It's the way the leadership got so bad that people are like, I can do so much, like the head teachers, because there was a head teacher, then there's like executive head teachers. I can do so much, but if you're telling me that this is in this child's best interest and you're not on the floor or whatever,
Mm,
and you're not trusting me to make decisions,
mm,
and things are just taking a turn for worse,
mm, mm.
and you're not really getting it, and you're not understanding the vocation, and you just see it as a business opportunity,
Yeah,
people just leave.
exactly, exactly, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that just breaks my heart. And I think what you said there, in terms of the system that, schools have had to work under, that, sometimes education is seen as being a business, and that just, yeah, it's as far from what it should be. It's not a business. It's not about profit. Yeah.
When I see people like that, I'm like, I will do a referral to Tesco's.
Yes.
I just
Yeah.
simply don't understand
Yeah. You
what,
don't. Mm,
yeah. Because
yeah.
I'm like, these are like, it's not, if it's a want, I can
Mm.
understand how you can profit off it. But this is a need. You can't profit off needs.
Exactly. And it's our children at the end
Mm.
of the day. It's our young people. What are the value? Oh, I don't even want to. Yeah, just makes me angry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah.
Um, what strategies can head teachers and senior school leaders implement to mitigate the impact of stress and burnout on themselves and their staff members?
It's interesting actually you say that. As I was preparing for this podcast, I went back to an article that I wrote for The Guardian at the same
Oh,
time
yeah.
I published this book. And they asked me a similar question. What are the tips that I would give to school leaders to help them prevent and manage burnout, or prevent burnout, I should say? And I looked at them and they're pretty much the same. I mean, there were eight. And out of the eight, I suppose my top three they remain the same. Learn to put yourself first. And that's not about being selfish. It's about really learning to listen to yourself, to listen to your body, to understand what your needs are. I know it's cliched, but no one can give from an empty cup. And just like they
Mm.
say on the airplane, put your oxygen mask on first. So true. The third one I'd have to say is, which I'd written here, was to stop and reflect. I think reflection is so often missed. I think it's Nancy Kline's book, isn't it? Time to Think. And again, we need that time to think. Head teachers are paid to make wise decisions. You can't make wise decisions if you're firefighting all of the time and if your leadership is reactive. You need time. We all need time to be able to reflect. And then the third one, I think, it's very personal because it's what I've had to learn. I have to learn to ask for help. No one is an island. No one can do the role of headship, leadership, any role really in life by ourselves. We are born for connection, I believe. We are born for community. And the more that we can learn to ask for help and to show our vulnerability, then of course the less lonely the weight or less heavy the burden becomes of leadership. So they're probably the three top tips I would give.
What would you advise to those who struggle to ask for help?
I'd get them to do a simple exercise. What's the cost? What's it costing you not to ask for help? Because I know what it cost me in my younger days, not asking for help. And I think if you can take someone to a place where they can have an honest conversation with themselves, then they'll realize that actually not asking for help is actually, yeah, it will take you to a place of actually doing more harm to yourself than good. So I think it's asking, what is the cost? What is it costing you not to ask for help?
How does emotional and mental well-being of head teachers and senior school leaders impact their ability to lead effectively and support student achievement as well as their staff?
I think it affects everything. I mean, you're not that long out of school, I don't think, Rosemary, but you will know, from the teacher or the school leader who comes into the class and they want to be with you and they're engaged and they're infectious.
Mm.
Then that lesson, those students, they're going to be engaged, aren't they? They're going to want to be there. From the teacher who comes in with poor emotional regulation, who's really unhappy, who doesn't want to be there. It's pretty simple, really. We are all adults, although sometimes we don't behave as adults. And we all have a responsibility to imagine, to not to manage our own emotional well-being. It's from being going from reactive to being responsive. Now, if we can be responsive to life and the challenges, because they come for all of us. But if we can understand we have a choice, I have a very good friend, I'm going to give her a plug now, actually, Catherine Lovewell. And all her work is about self-compassion, kindness, learning to breathe in the moment, learning just to be still enough so that whatever's coming along that might trigger your nervous system, you know the action to take that will enable you to remain calm and centered in terms of your response.
Sorry, is she the one with the basketball tumor?
No, Catherine Lovewell, her, just trying to think, she many years ago, she wrote a book called Every Teacher Matters. And yeah, and her very much all of her work is around self-compassion, kindness. She might be a good person for you to interview, actually.
What resources or support systems are available to help head teachers and senior school leaders navigate the complexities of their roles and responsibilities?
There are quite a few now, and I think really it's about enabling school leaders to be astute as to what they're looking for. So there are organisations such as myself that offer coaching, which is one-to-one private space to allow head teachers to just talk about the challenges of their role and find solutions. There are head teacher networks, social media groups that are out there, whether on LinkedIn or Facebook, that head teachers can join if they want to, share best practice or get ideas. So, and I think local authorities now, some better than others, but there are organisations who will also provide in-house support and training for school leaders. So there's more than there was when I first started, which was many years ago.
That's for sure.
It really is. Yeah, gosh, I can't tell you how many hours I spent searching for support that was non-existent. Yeah.
You know, it's your your approach to executive coaching. How does it differ from the traditional professional development methods for school leaders?
Because I would say the one, actually, I'd probably say there are two clear distinctions. One is we focus on the inner work as opposed to the outer work. So traditional executive coaching, focusing on external outcomes, very goal orientated. So very, I would say, left brain orientation, because that is the dominant way of engaging with the world and leadership. So rationality, logical, having plans, follow through. Whereas we're very much about the inner leadership. I used the term before, taking care of the soul in the role. We all go on an inner journey, and that journey is a journey of becoming. And whereas, it's very often traditional coaching doesn't always necessarily recognize that in terms of, what is the surface presentation as to why someone might come into coaching. It's what's underneath, how well they know themselves. Do they really know who they are? It's about being able to listen into the metaphor, the language that individuals use. It gives you insight into a deeper journey that individuals are going on. So the way I probably look at it is that we're about diving deep. I think traditional exec coaching is about staying in the shallows, but we want to go deep.
Um, how do you tailor, your coaching practice to the unique needs and challenges of individual school leaders? And what strategies do you use to promote growth and development?
I think and most coaches would have this in common. No, that's not true, actually, because it depends what methodology or school. First of all, coaching is person-centered. So it's about so you may have a coaching framework, or no, I wouldn't say framework. All coaches know that a coaching conversation is about enabling an individual to get from A to B, as it were. But you're not telling them, because that's using expertise, suggestions, thinking that you are the expert. You're not. So the way in which coaching, and you said about with individuals, well, basically that's it, Rosemary. It's to do with actually that no two people are the same. And it's not a one size fits all approach. So I can have a head teacher of a school, say in leafy suburbia. I can have a head teacher of a school in inner London, all very different back schools, being very different contextually, but also the individuals. But because as a coach, you are listening in. You use what the individual brings to the conversation. And it's that which makes the coaching unique. And that's what makes it different. And it's really interesting because we had to do some interviews for associates not too long ago. And for me, what was really interesting was in asking, how would you describe your coaching? There are some who are, I would say, very much at the transactional stage or just in the very early stages, where actually I could see that most of their coaches would get a very similar experience because it was a bit like coaching by numbers, as it were. Whereas the ones that we were looking for were individuals who, as I said earlier, were able to go deep, who can almost let go, in a sense, of a framework because you know, okay, I'm going to be led by this individual. What it is that they bring into the conversation that then tells me the questions that I need to ask. Not any that, you pick off a shelf. So what's your goal? How are you going to achieve it? But actually the more nuanced ones. So yeah, that's how and that's why I love coaching. I love being at that stage now in my professional career. I feel I can pretty much coach anyone. I was pretty scared when I first started out, but I've been doing this over 15 years now. And what I love is just being able to come alongside an individual, see them for who they are, and walk alongside them through questioning.
Can you discuss any like success stories or success stories that illustrates the impact of your coaching on the leadership capacity and performance of school leaders?
There's one that I really like to tell, and it sticks with me for a number of reasons. So this particular client, he's retired from headship now. And when he called me in, I was pretty nervous, even though I say that I coach most people, because he was not the kind of person I thought I coach or my company coaches. On the surface of things, when I observed him talk to his office staff, he was aggressive, he was rude, he was bullying. And so when I went into his office and I just asked him out of curiosity, why? Why me? Why integrity? Why have you asked us, or at the time it was myself, to be your coach? And then what transpired was a story whereby he had developed a reputation of being the turnaround head. So the head teacher who his local authority would put into failing schools. And so his modus operandi, his way of being, was basically to be very brusque, to be very authoritarian, and to tell people. He didn't really care about relationships. He would go into schools, fix things, and his way of fixing was firing people, shouting at people, telling them what to do. People became afraid. But if standards rose, and they'd only ever for a short while, but then the LA would have moved him on to the next school, then local authorities were happy, they were satisfied. And that's a story that he told me. I'll never forget this. I just said to him, is that who you really are? And tears just came to his eyes. And he's like, Viv, no one's ever asked me that question before. And I know why no one had ever asked him that question before, because those, again, who around him were like support, all they saw were raised standards of achievement. They never asked how. They never asked what was the cost to you, to him. And so we started on a journey together whereby I wasn't working on the surface. I was going deep, really going deep in terms of, well, tell me why you even first became as a teacher. Tell me more about what it is that sparks you. When do you find the light inside of you? What is it that you might need to let go of, this identity? What has been the cost of holding on to this identity? Who is it that you might want to become? And I'll never forget, towards the end of our time together, and he said to me, Viv, I've made a decision. And I was like, well, what's that? And he said, I'm going to stay. See, because normally what he would do is a turnaround head. Local authority would come knocking at the door. Okay, so you've done your job here. You've raised standards. You've got another school for you to now go to. And he said, normally, even without thinking, I would say yes. But he said, having worked with you, I now know how to listen in, to listen to myself for the first time. And this is incredible, really, when you think about it. Because for the first time, I'm having proper conversations with staff. I'm getting to know my staff. I'm getting to be in relationship with them. Viv, I feel something different that I've never felt in all my years of headship. I'm going to stay. And that was the school that he retired in. So that's probably the best example I can give you of the difference that coaching can make when we do the deep inner work with individuals, as opposed to just staying at the surface level of a conversation.
That must have been transformational for him,
Mm.
not just, in his professional life, but his personal life as well.
Yeah, totally, totally. And for me, it was a real privilege, particularly, in terms of what was presented when I first arrived at the school. And now what I would say is that was his social persona, that was his false self, that was the self that he'd been kind of like praised for, but it wasn't really him. And so, yeah, it was a privilege, real privilege. Yeah.
Um, sorry, I'm just still thinking about it. Um, what motivated you to write books and publications on topics related to educational leaderships? What key messages or theme do they explore?
Oh, goodness me. Don't know where to start in terms of my response to that. Because there are so many. Okay, I'm going to talk about, in response to your question, 3 specific things. So it's the motivation to write. Yeah.
Mm.
So this one, staying ahead, it was because at the time, no one had written about the realities of school leadership, the emotional toll, and it really see the difference coaching could make. So I wanted to put something out there that would make a difference in terms of how school leaders respond to the challenges. So that was one. The book that I've currently just written, and I'm pausing because it's a very personal piece. It's arisen out of my cancer diagnosis. And as I said to you, one of the things that happened during my recovery last year was I started to paint, and I've never painted before in my whole life. And I don't know if you're familiar with the archetype of the soul's journey.
Mm.
And at one point in my recovery, I put the paintings that I'd done at the time around me. And I was like, oh my goodness, they're depicting to me metaphorically the soul's journey. And so, yes, even though I'm feeling like I'm in the descent, so like the soul's journey being, something happens in life where which you haven't foreseen, it pulls you away from the normal, and there's confusion and so forth, worry and fear, which to me was my cancer diagnosis. And then you're plunged into this place of unknowing. And then eventually you come out the other side. But it's cyclical. We all have our different soul journeys. But it was very profound for me. And there were a lot of tears when I came back to work in January. I felt very vulnerable, which is another aspect of the soul's journey. It's like, when you're sort of coming out of that darkness time and you're still trying to find your feet. But I shared some of my paintings with my work colleagues and a few head teachers, and they were like, Viv, you should put it into a book. This is really powerful stuff. And so that's what I've done. It's called Learning to Walk in the Dark. It won't come out until January, but when I look at it now, I realize actually it's been one of the overarching themes of my career. You know, if we think of the dark as challenges, and we spoke at the beginning of this podcast around the levels of racism that I face, you know, what I realize now with this book, and it's almost like a reflective journal, and it's saying with each of those different stages of learning to walk in the dark, if we can develop 5 sort of attitudes, which are creativity, commitment, curiosity, courage, and connection, we can find ways to better navigate the challenges of life that we go through. So that's, yeah, that, no one could have told me this time last year that, Viv, one of the things on the other side of cancer will be a body of work, your paintings, and plus, you know, words that you want to share with others, you know, leaders, really is anyone, because we're all human, about what it means to go through challenging times. So that's that. And then I'm just about to start re-engage with my PhD, which again I sort of see as a legacy piece, really, which will really be exploring race and school leadership. So yeah, that's the things that I've written, that I'm involved with, that yeah, in terms of sharing something and hoping to make the world a better place in the process.
Can't wait to read your book when it comes out in January.
Thank you.
Can you share any examples of how your books or publications have been received by school leaders and the broader education community?
Yeah. So mainly, as you know, if I talk about staying ahead, you know, when it came out, oh my goodness, you're taking me back now, but I can remember so much. So I was interviewed on Women's Hour. I was interviewed on Radio 4, World at One. I was interviewed on London News. I had that Guardian piece, and the amount of head teachers who contacted me and said thank you. Probably, no, okay, I had all the media stuff, but it was all the head teachers who still to this day, you know, I get messages saying, thank you, your book saved my life. Thank you for being so honest about what this role is about. And, you know, and I still blog and write a lot about, you know, school leadership and also about race. And yeah, people, yeah, always get comments in terms of the difference that my thinking, my thoughts have made in terms of how people are either looking at the challenges of school leadership, whether that's just personally or when it comes to leading around matters of race.
So we have scenarios, like what, not scenarios, but so we've reached out to, I think, 30 head teachers and senior school leaders who would like some advice. And if there's, you know, and they want to hear what you think about it. So yeah, and we picked 4. I'm not going to go through all 30.
Good. I think, yeah, oh my God, 30. I don't know if I could do that.
Oh, yeah, Viv, sorry, we need to extend this for another 2 hours just to go through all 30. Like, yeah, that'd be exhausting. I'd be like, Viv, bye.
It would be, yeah.
So there was someone that wrote, they called it, they named themselves Isolated Leader.
Oh.
And they said, Dear Viv, as a head teacher, I often feel like I'm on an island. I constantly dealing with complex issues and making difficult decisions, but there are very few people I can truly confide in or seek guidance from. My colleagues are wonderful, but there was always a sense of distance because I'm a position. I find myself craving mentorship and peer support, but I don't know where to find it or how to ask for help without seeming weak. How can I break out of this professional isolation and find the support I need? From Isolated Leader.
All right. Well, they've done the first thing, haven't they? By by sharing actually what it is they're feeling. And I think really it would be to say, just Google head teacher support, to be honest. There is so much out there now. And so this person, I think I would say also, it's about claim your agency here now. You know, there is support out there for you, whether it's integrity, which is our company or other coaching companies that, there are so many now who have recognized that headship doesn't need to be done in isolation. So I just say Google. Actually, you know what? Make yourself a priority and say, okay, I'm going to spend 30 minutes Googling, researching head teacher support. Then I'm going to make a short list, and then I'm going to reach out to 3 organizations, and then I'm going to make a decision what support I'm going to access.
Amazing. Love that. It's to the point. It was there's you know what? I just received an email with somebody else who got I've got to close the floor. Somebody else who came with questions. And if there's gonna be like one more, because I feel like that's a really good like scenario, if you don't mind.
No,
Uh, so this person said, Dear Viv, I noticed a growing divide between our younger, newly qualified teachers and our more experienced staff. The younger teachers are enthusiastic about integrating new technology and modern teaching methods, while the more seasoned staff feel that traditional methods are being undervalued. The tension in the staff room, there's tension in the staff room, and I fear it might affect our students. How can I bridge the gap between these two groups and create a culture where all voices are respected and innovation is balanced with experience? From caught in the middle.
Oh, love it. What I would say is have the conversation. It's obviously the elephant in the room. So my question would be, have you had the conversation? What is it that we are not discussing? But also link it to be, what do we want our children's experience to be? Link it back to vocation. Why are we all here? What does it mean for our young people? So get clear about your purpose, why you're all there. And then, okay, what's the conversation we need to have about the culture how we get to there? What are the barriers? What do we then need to do to overcome them? But be open and be honest and name it. If it isn't named, you won't find the solution. And too often what will happen is people skirt around the edges. And it's no wonder then that no progress is made. Name it, be clear about it, but link it to the vision. Always link it back to our purpose, your purpose.
You know what I love? You know what I love you. Love the energy, love the passion. Oh, it's just amazing. It's like, no, because it's so infectious.
Oh.
And I'm like, I can imagine why you're so successful in what you do. I've, yeah, it's like, I know, like, I know there's some people, might not find your method like that works for them. But I'm like, how does it not? Like, it's so no, because it just makes me smile because it's
Thank
just a
you.
nice thing.
Thank you.
Dear Viv, I love how they all start with Dear Viv. It's great. A serious incident involving 2 staff from different cultural background recently occurred at our school, sparking tension among their peers and concern from parents. I want to address the situation delicately, to avoid escalating tensions further while fostering a more inclusive environment. However, I'm worried about saying the wrong thing or taking actions that might inadvertently cause more harm. How can I navigate this sensitive situation with empathy, fairness, and a clear commitment to our school's value of diversity and inclusion? I don't know what to do. And I think as a white woman, I don't know how to navigate this delicate situation from anxious about equity.
Love it as well. Love it. Love it. Love it. So a couple of responses here. And also, because I don't think I need to know all the details. Obviously, it's got to be confidential. One of the things I would say, particularly in terms of sensitive issues like this, people need to feel understood. So first of all, I think it's about, if you haven't done this already, first of all, I'd have it one-on-one and just seek to understand. Don't even like comment necessarily, but just say, I'm here to understand. I really need to understand from your perspective, but also say, which sometimes individuals don't do, and I am learning as well. So I might trip up, I might make mistakes, but I want to get it right. So show your intention. So with both parties, I would listen. Secondly, what I would probably advise is actually you might want an expert facilitator or mediator, because from my own experience, when you're in that position where you've got to mediate between two positions, emotionally and psychologically, that's a lot for you to bear, because you're having to be the head teacher or the leader in this case, and you're having to work out both sides. If you can have someone who is neutral and they mediate a three-way conversation, it allows each person to be heard equally. And the heavy lifting, as it were, is done by the mediator. And it means all of you, and particularly yourself, the person who's made this inquiry, it means you can be present to yourself and you can take the time to respond and really anchor into how you are feeling. And it will be for the mediator to be able to read the emotion in the room and make sure people are fully heard. So that would be my suggestion. One, first of all, seek to understand, just listen, just do a listening piece with both of them. And then I would probably suggest a mediator, because then it means all three of you are given equal space. And then also the mediator will be clear about contracting the purpose of the meeting and contracting what the process will look like, and helping you all agree what the outcomes will be and how you will all contribute to a conducive conversation. That would be my advice.
Amazing. Dear Viv, I'm finding it challenging to lead my school effectively because of constant micromanagement from my LA, I'm guessing mean local authority, and governing board officials. They frequently intervene in decisions, second guess my actions, and impose directives that sometimes feel disconnected from our school's unique needs. I'm starting to feel like my hands are tied, and it's affecting my ability to innovate and make meaningful change. How do I maintain my autonomy and advocate for my school's best interests while navigating these external pressures from feeling stifled?
That's a tricky one. And for me, even just listening, it's like, I want to be in a one-to-one, because on that one, to be honest, it feels to me, you probably have two options. One is, if it's all those external pressures, it's different if it's maybe just coming from one potential, maybe it's just your governors. If you've got your governors, your LA and other external bodies, one of the things that we know for well-being and health, particularly school leaders, you need autonomy. And if you don't have autonomy, that's when you start to feel really as though you're losing your sense of agency. Now, if you feel, so this is person X, if you feel that there's I'd like to know, maybe you ask yourself, what are the solutions that you have tried to address this? And if in asking yourself, you look at those solutions and you realize maybe they've come to nothing, or there's lessons you've learned, to be honest, I tell you to move on. Because if you have tried and there hasn't been positive outcomes from what you have already tried, and I'm making the assumption here that this person has tried things to try and get a greater sense of autonomy. But if in trying that, you're not being heard, things haven't changed, sometimes we have to move on. We just have to read the signals, read the signs. This place isn't for me. And take the learning, because there will be learning, and move on. That would be my suggestion.
Amazing. The last one, which I added, which just came through right now, is it's important issue. Dear Viv, recently I've become aware of subtle but persistent racial prejudice among some of my staff members. It's nothing overt, but there are microaggressions and biased attitudes that make our minority students and teachers, including me, feel uncomfortable and unwelcome. I don't feel like I can show I'm uncomfortable, as I don't want to seem weak. I want to address these issues head on and foster a genuinely inclusive environment, but I'm worried about the defensiveness or backlash from staff who may not see the problem. How can I confront this issue effectively, promoting awareness and change without causing more division? from seeking true inclusivity?
Wow, this is a big one. There are a number of different places to start. The coach in me wants to ask a number of questions. Obviously, I can't because, it's just a question that's come through. But I'd like to know, how have they arrived? How has the school arrived at this point? What has gone on before? When there have been discussions around race or whatever, what has been the climate? How have people responded? Because as a coach, you always want to know the context. Because that is really important information. I don't have that now. But a couple of things I would be suggesting is, as I said in response to another question, an open conversation needs to be had. And first of all, it might not necessarily be about race. It might just be, what does it mean to be safe in this school? What does it mean to be heard? What does it look like to be heard? What is the culture that we want? What does it mean to thrive? So,
You know what? On our questionnaire
mm,
form that we sent out to these head teachers, there was a context section
yeah.
that was optional for people to fill out. I can read you that if you like.
Okay. Yeah. Go on.
So over the past few months, notice it says over the past few months, noticeably, I've received several concerns from both students and a few staff members about subtle but persistent racial prejudice in our school.
Mm,
Parents have made complaints as well. For example, some teachers have been making offhand comments or jokes that, while perhaps unintentional, are hurtful to our minority ethnic students. I also noticed that certain students from minority backgrounds are often disciplined more harshly than their peers for similar behaviours. Few teachers seem to have low expectations for those students, which has reflected to their feedback and grading. I try to address these issues quietly in a one-to-one conversation, but I feel like I'm scratching the surface and some staff become defensive or dismissive when the topic is brought up. I sense a growing tension, and I'm worried about the impact this is having on our school culture and most importantly on our students' sense of safety and belonging.
mm,
I want to take meaningful steps to address this, fostering an environment where all students feel respected and valued, and all staff are aware and committed to equity.
mm.
However, like I said previously, I'm unsure how to approach this without causing a backlash or making staff feel attacked. How can I create a more open, reflective, and inclusive culture that addresses these issues directly and constructively?
So I am going to say to this individual, you need to be asking yourself some questions. You need to be asking yourself, what do you think has brought what you're observing to where it is now? Because it's telling me that there's something within the school culture that has probably always been there, that probably wasn't addressed. And as we know, society feel what happens outside, we also feel inside. So I really ask you to reflect on what has been your approach to EDI to date? What has been your approach to race work to date? What are the lessons that you have learned? It's a bit like the advice I gave to one of the other questions about, you have to be able to reflect first of all. So I can give you guidance around this, but some of the groundwork you'll have to do yourself. So you need to reflect on what you've already done. What are the lessons that you have learned? And then in terms of how you want things to change, you'll be clearer about that once you've answered those questions. But my gut tells me and my experience tells me you'll probably need to approach race work differently and EDI work differently, because this work is about individuals understanding how they've come to be socialized around race, how they feel it's acceptable for those who are doing that with the microaggressions and the comments and so forth, what it is within their psychological and emotional makeup that they think that that's okay. So there's so much there. And what I would say to this individual is, you can book in a call with me or a member of my team, because actually this is deep work. We're confident in our approach and how we help schools address matters around racism, but it's not a tick box exercise. And it is an exercise that requires you to step in fully and to understand what that stepping in fully means as a leader. Actually, we've got a webinar coming up 1st of October, so you might want to book yourself on that to find out more. Yeah.
Amazing. You know, like, and that's the end of our scenarios. And we just have a few questions, concluding questions, and we're done. What inspires you to pursue this topic and share it with our listeners?
So when you say this topic, are we talking specifically now about race or?
No, just about your coaching and consultancy work.
What inspires me? I think I can reach the point in my life now, Rosemary, where I can say, I feel it's my gift and I feel it's my purpose. And I want, there's a Beyonce song, I don't know if you know it, called I Was Here. It was my niece in America who introduced it to me many years ago. But there's a line in it goes, but it's basically she's saying, I want my life to have mattered. I want, when I'm dead and gone, that people will know because of my life. And that's really it, even like with my cancer, I'm getting a bit tearful now. Like with my cancer, I don't believe what I went through last year was just for Viv Grant alone. I learned so much through that. And it's kind of like, Viv, if you don't share that and you just keep that to yourself, how does that align with what you're trying to help school leaders to do? You have to walk the talk, Viv. So, what inspires me, going back to your question is, I do believe I have a different take on what it means to be well in the world. I do believe I have a different take on leadership and, what it means to be soul-led. And we've seen too much in our world, particularly over the past 14 years, where, a focus on the individual, a disconnect from society, nature, our planet. We've seen the damage that has done.
Mm.
And I can't, while my company still has some influence and while I have some influence as a Black woman, then I want my voice to be heard. Because, I think collectively, it's not just my voice, but my voice alongside others who feel the same way, then perhaps we can be the change. So that's what inspires me.
Thank you so much for sharing. You okay?
I am okay. Yeah, just every now and then I think I have to get used to that. There are times when I think I'm fine. And then I remember what I've been through and where I'm at. And I'm still processing.
It must be really, really difficult. It's especially when it's like unexpected attacks, like memories and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's still working its way through my, I mean, when I say it's still working its way through my body, not the cancer, I hope. Got my next blood test next week. But just more what the journey has meant, really. Yeah, what the journey has meant. And I don't want to minimize.
yeah,
But sometimes that does mean staying in the painful places sometimes.
it's
Yeah.
just feeling it all. It's just like, sometimes it's like easier to just brush past it. Was
Yeah.
the line that you were looking for, I want to leave my footprints on the sands of time?
Oh, did you? Yes, yes. Yeah, exactly.
There was this guy, I think it was an astronaut, I don't know who it was, who left something of his daughters. I think it was either a picture or her name
Mm.
on the moon. And it's going to be there because the moon is like some sort of sand and it's going to be there for the rest of time. You know, he did it literally, but
But again, even you just sharing that, for me, again, one of the things with the cancer has really, I suppose, awoken within me that sense of awe. I think sometimes as human beings, we can get a bit too grandiose in thinking we are the pinnacle of existence, of life. This world is magical. This world is awe-filled. And, there is just something about recognizing, let's treasure the sacredness in our own life, but also in life around us.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
Looking back on our conversation, what's the message you want our audience to remember?
Oh goodness, Rosemary, what's the message I want the audience to
Everything
read?
and everything we discussed, all of it.
Oh, what's the message? Okay, we're saying here the audience is head teachers and senior school leaders. What I want them to remember is that they leave, yeah, footprints in the hearts of our young people. And for those footprints to be tender, to be footprints that guide and direct, they need to pay attention to who they are and how they are showing up in the world. And that self-care isn't a selfish act. It's important. Yeah, they're the last words I think I'd say. Mm.
Are there any upcoming projects, events, or resources you'd like to share with our audience?
Okay.
And where can our listeners find you or connect with you to stay up to date on your work?
Okay. So we've got a race identity and school leadership webinar that's coming up on the 1st of October. If they just go on to www.integritycoaching.co.uk, they will find details there. If there are head teachers who are looking, I've just got to find my phone now, yeah, just for what I would call a soulful place where you can connect with like-minded individuals, with head teachers who really care about the inner work and really being able to just connect again with why they are here. We've got a wonderful Breakfast for the Soul session coming up on the 17th of September. That will be myself and Joshua Okanola, one of my associates. And we have a storyteller coming along, Shane Ibbs, and Shane is just wonderful. And he'll be telling a story to help school leaders just reconnect with the start of the new school year and what's being asked of them. So they're just two key things for this term, but all details can be found on our website, www.integritycoaching.co.uk, and I can be contacted via the website, and probably LinkedIn's the best place, Viv Grant on LinkedIn.
Either way, all of this will be linked down below. This is an unplanned question. What would you like to say to everyone who said that you should be a cashier, you're gonna be a failure? You should not, what would you like to say to them?
What would I like to say to them? Wow. Could be too easy to say, look at me now, because that's not what I want to say. I think what I would say to them, which is what I say to school leaders now when I speak at conferences, you have a choice when you step into become a teacher or a school leader, you have a choice. Our young people, they look to you in terms of their hopes, their dreams and ambitions. So remember that, a word, a look, a glance, it can either fan the fuels of fan the fuel of what is within a young person, or it can dampen that flame and put the flame out. Don't forget that. Do not take lightly the responsibility that you have as an educator. That's what I would say to them. And then I would tell them my story. And I would tell them that, yeah, you tried to put out the flame. You tried to put out the spark, the hope, the ambition. And it hurt me. It did. And I'd tell them how much it hurt. But then I'd say, some way along the line, I found other teachers, other mentors who saw the spark in me and
There's no
allowed me
flame
to,
anymore, it's a fire now.
yeah, exactly. So something along those lines, I think I would say. Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to add? Any final thoughts you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Not really, only just to give a plug actually for the book coming out in January, Learning to Walk in the Dark, because really that book, it won't just be for school leaders, it's for everyone.
Mm.
And it's for all those who really, we all struggle, we all go through difficulties in life. And my hope is, as I sort of say in the book, that it'll provide comfort and an understanding of what it means basically to be human. So yeah, just to look out for that. And Rosemary, maybe we'll sort of plug you to help us plug it when it comes out in January.
Definitely. I'm like when you moved, I was like, oh my God, is she gonna do a reveal? And I was like, ooh. I was like,
No, my phone went. I had to turn it off.
I was like getting excited. I was like, you know what, Ruth, calm down. Finally, last question, and then you're free.
Yeah.
What is one thing that you're grateful for today?
One thing that I'm grateful for today, you know what? I'm just looking out at my window. So I'm in my office here, and there's a big window here. And I suppose what I'm grateful for is just for life. Again, this journey has told me that every new day, the fact that I can look out of my window and I can just see blue sky behind the grey, the clouds. I'm grateful for life, and I'm grateful that I'm here. That's what I would say. That's what I'm grateful for, Rosmi.
Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you.
You know what? This is, yeah, I think this is a highlight of my day, honestly.
Oh, bless you.
My face is actually hurting from smiling.
Oh, bless
Um,
you.
it's, yeah.
Mm.
You know what is what you've said, I think is going to have an impact on my life.
Oh, my lovely. In what way?
Perseverance, the resilience, the way that you are, it's just the energy, the passion. It's like it feels like every time you speak, it's like a match, like when you burn yourself, like, oh, it's like oh, but yeah,
Oh, well,
will have an impact.
thank you. And just know, Rosmi, I want to say to you, you're a very brave young woman. And, you're saying, okay, in terms of myself here, but look, and this is what I'd be saying, I'm sure your teachers have said this to you as well. You're here for a purpose, yeah? And all that you have been through, that's growing you, making you. There's so much more. I know, I can say this because of my 50 odd years, right? I'm allowed to say this, but there is that the world wants of you. So just keep doing what you're doing because it is so needed. So needed.
Oh, you're gonna make me cry.
We're both being tears. But I mean it. I mean it. And I know just from the way that you described your teachers, they would have said something similar to you. I can't believe that they wouldn't have done.
Viv, you need to stop. You need to go away.
Okay. All right. Okay. We'll stop now because my daughter's calling me. But
Thank you so much. Honestly,
that's
thank you so
that's
much.
that's okay.
As we're coming to the close of this insightful episode, I'm reminded of the profound impact that dedicated professionals like Viv Grant are making in the realm of educational leadership. Viv's journey, expertise, and passion for supporting head teachers and senior school leaders have illuminated the challenges they face and the transformative power of effective support. Throughout our conversation, we explored the intricate landscape of educational leadership, delving into the responsibilities, pressures, and aspirations of those at the helm of our schools, from navigating complex decision making to fostering cultural well-being. Viv has shared invaluable wisdom garnered from her diverse experience as an executive coach, author, and PhD student. As we bid farewell, let's carry forward the torch of inspiration ignited by Viv's words. Let's champion the importance of self-care, professional development, and mentorship in nurturing resilient and effective leaderships who shape the future of education. Whether you're a seasoned educator, an aspiring leader, or simply an advocate for positive change in our school, remember that your contributions matter. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe as this continues to let us do the work that we're doing. Stay iconic. Until next time.